This is Back Roads of Illinois, server to farmers and ranchers in central Illinois and the Midwest. Today's edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were bringing you lasted for farming sources and information sponsored by AgriGold. We're glad you're here on today. I'm Cesar Delgado on today. I had a conversation with Dr. Jones for nitrogen rate of return to the crop at the field day in Oglesby for Illinois Valley Community College at the field day. I caught up with him on the corn estimate from the nitrogen rate. Otherwise, we were joining with Ed Usset from the University of Minnesota on the grains markets for today's market, and we return to talk on the event will be held in Bylines, Illinois in Adams County, Illinois. We were talking about this event with Travis Meter from the University of Illinois Extension. This been Back Roads of Illinois. I'm in the field day at Illinois Community College. I am here with John Jones for Nitrogen Rate Trail for the University of Illinois Extension in Oglesby. John, let's start with our conversation about this nitrogen rate trail for this field in Oglesby at Illinois Community College. Could you tell us how is the rate of nitrogen for this year?
So the study this year, we're evaluating 6 nitrogen rates from 0 to 250, and then another, a 7th rate at 300 pounds of nitrogen per acre. And we're looking at the yield response to nitrogen rate at the trial here in Oglesby with and without sulfur applied, around 30 pounds of sulfur. So far this year, looking at the crop condition, there's been a fair amount of background soil organic nitrogen available. The crop response is clearly present when increasing nitrogen rates. We've increased the amount of crop biomass, kernel size, but then also the number of kernels around the ear, and then kernel length on the ears as well. So I think we're going to clearly see some yield response to nitrogen. The response to sulfur is maybe not as clear yet. We will be evaluating that when the combines roll out this fall, though.
How is the rate of sulfur for this year?
So we've applied 30 pounds of sulfur. In this study, we did use gypsum. We'll be using ammonium thiosulfate and ammonium sulfate going forward. But the sulfur that we applied this year was broadcast and incorporated right before planting.
Are you watching for the nitrogen cost for this fall?
Yes, so certainly aware that nitrogen fertilizer costs are relatively high, especially in relation to corn grain costs as well. So we're at about an 8-to-1 ratio of corn grain costs to nitrogen costs if we're looking at fall anhydrous ammonia. That's a little bit lower, or we'll say less favorable price condition than we've commonly had over the years. And in that case, I think it's really important to use available data to understand what has been the economic optimum nitrogen rate in previous years on your soils or similar soils to your farm. So we're looking at cost conditions right now, and we have tools available to evaluate what could be the potential optimum nitrogen rate going forward, and then you can make an agronomic and economic based decision of how much nitrogen to apply.
Do you have some concerns about this fall on the trade barriers on nitrogen?
I wouldn't say I'm the most well-versed in nitrogen trade, specifically in fertilizer use. I think what we certainly watch is the price and the amount of exported The amount of exported nitrogen that's come out of certain countries has changed with geopolitical issues. Probably more in trade aspect. I get a lot of questions around phosphorus fertilizers, where traditionally China had exported quite a bit of phosphorus fertilizer. They've ceased to do that in terms of the levels that they had previously done. And we see that, we'll say MAP or DAP prices are anywhere from 10 to 15% higher this year than they were last year.
All right.
Of course, how about MAP?
Sure. So certainly when thinking about decisions of applying MAP as dry fertilizer in the fall or in the spring, looking at soil test levels to base that decision is the most important thing in the first step. So if we're dealing with a low or optimum testing soil, likely you're wanting to apply phosphorus fertilizer to build those levels or at least maintain and replace crop removal. However, if we're in a very high testing scenario where let's say you're testing 60 to 75 parts per million or higher, it's pretty realistic that you can back off and not apply P in those soils and not see a yield reduction because you're in, we'll say, a drawdown phase to the optimum level of soil test P that you'd like to maintain. But we want to make sure that we're measuring the amount of removal that's occurring with accurately calibrated yield monitors and then looking at grain nutrient concentrations.
Could you tell us what's impact on nitrogen decay in the corn?
I'm not familiar with nitrogen. Could you clarify nitrogen decay in the corn, please?
You mentioned that your presentation's about turquoise. What do you recommend within the plants are dead?
So at this point, as grain fill is occurring and we're starting to think about getting closer to black layer, those plants are cannibalizing themselves to move photosynthates and energy, essentially, energy consumed and spent, to the ear itself. And so those tissues or those leaves are starting to die if they've been nutrient deficient, or they might be dying just from simple drawdown in the plant maturing. The leaf that I showed in the picture of my presentation was deficient in nitrogen and potassium in that case. And we saw a dying tissue that had been yellow on the outer margins of the leaf and in the inner margins of the leaf where we would expect to see potassium and nitrogen respectively. And so in that case, we were dealing with really two nutrients being deficient in that specific plant. That was part of a study that we're looking at the interaction of nitrogen and potassium. And so in other plants that we'd seen only potassium or only nitrogen deficiencies, we would expect those to be limiting yield. But in that specific picture, I was saying that those nutrients can interact to either harm or help yield. And what the study has so far coming to bear is that we need to make sure that we have adequate potassium, and then we'll likely have a better internal use efficiency of nitrogen within the corn plant.
What is your final thoughts about the nitrogen cost for this post-harvest season?
I think one of the things to think about is that if fall nitrogen is in your plan, make sure that you're watching soil temperatures as application's occurring. If we're dealing with a dry fall, sometimes that effectiveness of an anhydrous application can be something that we want to make sure that we're getting complete slot or slit closure when we're applying anhydrous ammonium, and then waiting till those soil temperatures at 4 inches are at least at 50 degrees and cooling. Certainly when we think about moving after fall application into spring, think about trying to enhance or optimize the efficiency of that nitrogen application. In general, when we think about optimal nitrogen timings, usually that's in the space of within a 2 to 3 week window before planting up to, we'll say, an early side dress application. If you're going to be applying late, that's something that's interesting to consider as well. One thing that we talk about the cost relative to the MRTN philosophy of determining nitrogen guidelines, we usually look at the cost of the highest proportion of nitrogen source that we use. So if most of your N is going to be going on with fall anhydrous, you look at the price of that fall anhydrous. If most of it's going to be going on as a side dress, look at the price of UAN next year as well.
Thanks, John. It's my pleasure to have you here at Illinois Community College in Oglesby at the field day.
Thank you, Caesar. I was really appreciate taking the time to talk with me, and have a good day yourself as well.
Thank you.
This is John Jones for Nitrogen Rate of the University of Illinois Extension in August. I'm joining with Ed Usset from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. We were talking about the grains markets, especially with these prices. What is going on with the beans markets with Ed and the corn markets? Hey Ed, how are you today?
Caesar, I'm doing great, and just for one last time, note that my Vikings beat your Bears, so my sympathies to you. But it was a fun game to watch.
Yes, indeed. Ed, let's take a moment to review the grains markets. What is your thoughts with the yield trends in the corn markets?
Well, I just saw the results from a Bloomberg. You know, Caesar, I don't get out and walk the fields or anything like that. I just track what others are talking about, other experts. And the Bloomberg survey must have had a couple dozen different thoughts and opinions. It's pretty amazing how broad the thoughts are on the yield, anywhere from something just under 183 bushels per acre for a nationwide average, as high as 189. That's a pretty big spread. We've got something, the potential for a surprise on Friday. I myself am very interested in where Minnesota corn crop comes in because unlike your state of Illinois or Iowa or Indiana, Minnesota has never averaged 200 bushels per acre for a statewide average. And we have a shot at that this year.
Do you have any concerns about these yields trends from last month?
Well, I get the sense that a lot of people feel that the USDA overshot with their 188.8 or was it 188.2 uh, uh, yield bushels per acre, and they're going to pare it back. Uh, it'll be a very interesting report on Friday. I'm looking for it.
Some people are disagree.
Yeah, they do.
Do you have some concerns about the export to China after the harvest season?
Oh, I have huge concerns, and the market has huge concerns too. That's why we're at 150 to 170 under in North Dakota. We have no reason to move those soybeans to the West Coast, or very little reason. We're seeing the same thing in Western Minnesota. It's going to be a tough year if we can't get our trade issues ironed out and get back to exporting in some sort, something close to a fashion, whatever that is.
Of course, Ed.
Um,
What about the technicals buying in play without any trading in China?
The technicals don't look particularly well. I'm thinking of the large traders and the commitment of trader reports. I'm seeing that some of the big players evening up. They're getting out of their shorts. They're still short, but signaling that maybe we're working towards a harvest low. They often come. I know harvest hasn't started in corn and soybeans, but it's not uncommon for the low to start before harvest begins. It happened a year ago. It's happened before, and I think that's what I'm crossing my fingers on right now. That maybe we have established a harvest low, or I should say, a life of contract low. That doesn't mean, Caesar, that we're heading straight back up. But the first step to heading up is to quit going down. And I'm crossing my fingers that we've established our lows.
How about the fundamentals on the beans markets as well?
Well, again, it's all about that lack of exports. The domestic demand side, pretty good, looks favorable, but we need both. This country has exported 40 to 50% of our soybean production for decades. And uh, we need those exports. They're an important part of the demand side of this equation.
What is your final thoughts about the beans markets for right now?
Well, I can't get away from looking at some very large carries in the corn market, in the soybean market, and in the wheat market. You've got the uh, March spread in corn at 18 cents and 35 cents out to the July. I'm looking at soybeans. You've got a spread from November to March of 34 cents, November to July at 57 cents this morning. That's an opportunity for producers who have storage on the farm to store their new crop and sell that deferred contract, be it the March, the May, the July, at a big carry. They're going to put the carry in their pocket over time. They are going to hedge against lower prices. We need that protection in case we're going lower. You'll get that grain, the sale into the new tax year. That's a plus. And then the final one is those terrible basis levels. You buy time that in the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months, we can figure out these issues on the export side and heal up that basis. And if we can heal up that basis, that'll go a long way to making that storage hedge look good.
How about the RVO? Do you see some opportunities for the beans?
Well, I'm not a policy expert, Caesar. I don't track those things as closely as a lot of experts do in the industry. I know, though, that we're in the midst of a rapid expansion of crushing capacity in the U.S. We've already put a lot of it behind us in the last 2 years, but we have even more expansions opening. I think three or four more in the next year, year and a half, slotted to opening. We need that oil demand for renewable diesel to justify those new plants. So we're going to hope the policy favors renewable diesel.
True. Thanks very much for today. I enjoyed our conversation, Ed.
I enjoyed it too, Caesar, and better luck to your Bears the next time they meet Minnesota.
Of course.
Of course.
This is Ed Usset from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities on back roads of Illinois. I'm talking about the cattle markets with Travis Meter from the University of Illinois Extension in Urbana-Champaign. Travis is a beef specialist in Urbana-Champaign campus. Hey, Travis, how are you and welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm doing very good, Caesar. Good to be with you.
Travis, let's talk about your event in Western Illinois. Could you tell our audience about it?
Yes, we've got a beef field day at our Beef Research Center coming up tomorrow on September 10th. It's an evening program. It's one of our annual programs that we host. We like to feature research updates and timely topics. So we'll have speakers from campus that will join us and discuss some of our research on heifer development, also some information around structural correctness and some technology that we're using to visually assess cattle prior to the entry to the feedlot. And then we'll talk a little bit about soil health, animal health, and the cattle market.
What is your top priority for that event for tomorrow?
Yeah, I think one of the top priorities of the event is always to give producers the opportunity to network together.
Mm.
So the research information we share, I think, is also a feature. Some of the information is published, and some of it is just kind of hot off the presses, so it's new, and we're excited to share that with the producers. But also just to host an event, and we're going to have a meal and share all kinds of information and ideas between each other.
Mm. Mm.
How many of heads is producing in Western Illinois?
Yeah, I don't have the exact metrics on cow numbers, but if we do look at kind of some of the state statistics, there's no doubt that the west central part of the state and northwest central part of the state is where we have some of our bigger cow herds and bigger cow calf operators. And so that's a lot to do with just the lay of the land and what best suits the land. Many cases in Illinois, we have varying geography, and along those more rolling hills definitely suit cattle production more so than our big flat black soils. Even though we do know cattle production occurs all throughout the state, it just makes sense when you drive through Western Illinois and along the Mississippi River, that's a great place to house some beef cows.
Like in South Dakota?
There probably is some similarities. I would say that we're blessed in Illinois to have an abundant amount of water. We've got, even on our rolling lands, we've got a good soil that can grow productive forage. And so, um, yeah, we really do have a good option. The other thing that I love about Illinois is in many areas of the state, even next to a pasture, we have cornfields, and we can graze crop residues, and we can allow those cows to recycle the aftermath of a corn harvest by corn stalk grazing with beef cows. And so there's some uniqueness to cattle production in Illinois, but there's a lot of synergy that I think exists there too.
Great to hear that. What is your final thoughts about the feeder cattle?
Sure, I'll summarize by saying I think the cow calf operators are in the driver's seat right now. They're weaning calves that are worth the most that they've ever been worth. So the profitability of the cow calf sector is excellent. I think on the feeder cattle side, the end user would be those feedlots that are buying those cattle. I think risk management is really important on laying these cattle in, even with our more economical feeds and lower corn price. It's still important to have some risk management applied going forward. We know that there's several options to use in terms of risk management. But I think looking at locking in some of your feed costs and making sure that you've got just known costs going forward and known floors for that marketing will be important to making sure that this set of cattle that are being placed right now are are still a benefit and not a set of cattle that can reduce the profitability of your feeding operation. Those cattle feeders are really good about sharing the profits that they made on the last turn of cattle through purchasing the next set. So we just want to make sure that they're still being going to have some profitability going forward. And with these really high feeder cattle prices, it's important that they look at risk management for those out cattle that are going out, those fat cattle that will be going out later on in the year or first part of next year.
What happened to the cattle expansion since last couple years ago?
Caesar, I think that's a good question and one we don't have a ton of data for yet. We always look towards the USDA cattle inventory reports to tell us if we're expanding the herd. I would say just in conversations with cattle producers day in and day out, heifer retention is probably just starting, in my opinion. It's hard to know the balance of older producers that may be exiting the business and younger producers that may be entering or expanding operations. It's just very difficult to know that, and regional differences are a real
Oh,
thing. In the last several years, we've seen the cow herd decline. A lot of it is profitability, but also we've had just drought in areas where the cow herd resides. And so when you don't have profitability and you don't have grass for cows to graze, that gets very difficult to expand the herd or maintain numbers. So we've seen numbers decline. We're at record low cow numbers right now. The 10-year cattle cycle is a real thing. So in all likelihood, we're at kind of the lows or approaching the lows of our cow herd inventory. And so, with good profitability and hopefully some rainfall and pastures, I would expect that we'll start to build the cow herd here shortly. And I just don't think our expansion is going to be as rapid as it was last time. And so, hopefully, with a more modest, slower expansion of the cow herd, we can still have some remaining years on really good cattle prices.
Thanks, Travis.
Absolutely, Caesar. Thanks for the invite. Glad to be on with you.
This is Travis Meter from the University of Illinois Extension.